The story so far on Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. So in this chapter, we've encountered scary entities such as Miss Delight, who has a creepy dark past, and even the terrifying Catnap has some interesting secrets, making me realize that he isn't such a bad guy after all. After playing through the game a couple of times and reading into some of the secrets, I'm going to explain the story so far, as well as discuss some theories that'll answer questions such as who is Ollie, what is Poppy's true intentions, and more importantly, is the prototype the main villain? Because I believe there's something far more sinister than the prototype in store. Actually, I think the prototype may be a good guy. The theories are going to get pretty crazy, so let's begin. So at the end of chapter 2, we hopped on the train with Poppy when she revealed she wasn't going to let you escape right away, that you're far too useful, leaving you, the player, unsure if you can actually trust her. The train shortly crashes, and this is where chapter 3 begins. You wake up from the crash to Catnap picking you up and dropping you down the chute. Take note that he doesn't ever actually attempt to kill you throughout this entire chapter. He more so just kind of watches you throughout the game. And as you progress through the area, you receive a phone call where you first talk to Ollie.
Hey, can you hear me? You look kinda lost.
Now Ollie throughout the game will be assisting you, giving keys and battery packs from an undisclosed location, and we never actually see Ollie, but more on his identity later. After a few puzzles and activating the tower, we find ourselves in the main area of the game, Playcare, an on-site underground orphanage to look after children. Though we soon may realize that the orphaned children would later be used for horrific experimentations, turning them into toys. We'll look at some of the tapes in a moment, but the goal for the player in chapter 3 is to reverse this toxic gas that is produced so that you're able to clear out the lower areas and enter the prototype's lair. To do all this, you have to reroute the electricity, all while trying to steer clear of Catnap. And we only know the terrors of Catnap because in the beginning of the chapter, a trailer plays out about the smiling critters, where they're happy to see Catnap and ask him to help them go to sleep. Catnap then sprays out this red gas and something horrific happens. We then hear the news reports stating that the Catnap toys have to be recalled and pulled from the stores as this gas was giving kids nightmares. And we see for ourselves the true horrors of that gas in the first building, the Home Sweet Home Orphanage. As we enter, we encounter the red gas, and being without a mask, we're forced to go through it. As we walk down a hallway, we come across a radio detailing some horrific events about Elliot Ludwig, the founder of Playtime Co.
Local authorities report that the body of a young boy has been found on the estate of the late Elliot Ludwig, an esteemed toy maker and originator of the Playtime Company, found in an upstairs bedroom in a large...
It's pretty spooky, but not as scary as this next audio recording, where at first listen, it's just nonsense, but if you were to get the audio and play it in reverse, you're able to make this out.
You come in here and you kill and murder, you pillage and destroy. Your presence was demanded 10 years ago and you didn't show up. 1995. You were supposed to be here. Why weren't you here? You missed the event. You missed the meeting. You missed the party. You have no right to be here.
Essentially, the player is being called a murderer, meaning the player isn't so innocent after all. This is even further backed up while listening to another tape that again attempts to make you feel guilty.
We're certain that in the days to come, you'll find your new family here every bit as loving and supportive as your own. And should you come back years later, your conscience finally getting the better of you, may you descend into the dark and the dust, finding all that awaits you are incomprehensible horrors.
At this point, a nightmarish Huggy would appear and chase after you until he grabs you and you realize this whole area was just a nightmare. Now this scene actually reveals a lot about you, the player. All this calling you a murderer and being told that your conscience got the better of you can only mean that the player was very much a part of the grueling experiments that happened. And this date, August 8th, 1995, is referring to the Hour of Joy, the event where the toys broke loose and took the lives of many Playtime Co. employees, but more on that later. As you explore the orphanage, you see many different rooms detailing the horrors within this place. In one of the rooms is Kissy Missy, who isn't actually hostile to the player. Instead, she's looking at a picture of a child, revealing that this was her as a human. In one of the tapes that you find, we hear a scientist talking about a child who he refers to as a subject, more than likely the next experiment to transform into a toy. And as the scientist is talking, in comes another child, wondering what is happening to his friend.
To perform.
What are you doing with my friend?
What are you doing out of bed? How did you get in here?
Is Kevin sick? Why did you take him away?
Yes, Kevin is very sick. Very, very sick.
See, Playcare wasn't just an orphanage, but a place for experimentation. Mommy Longlegs was one of these orphans who would go through the Bigger Bodies Initiative, a program that utilized the orphans to transform them into these large toys. And through this ARG that Mob Entertainment put out, we actually find out that Catnap was once an orphan as well, going by the name of Theodore Gramble. And what's interesting about Theodore Gramble is that he actually befriends a prototype while he's still a human. And looking at the documents and the drawings made by Theodore, we actually realize that the prototype was trying to help Theodore escape Playtime Co. before they could turn him into an experiment. This is further shown as 2 grab packs were missing, but unfortunately the escape failed as Theodore would get severely injured with the grab packs. Not wanting him to die, the prototype is forced to return Theodore to the staff, as stated in this note here, saying, instead, it chose to carry the boy to staff to save him. Had it not intervened though, the boy likely wouldn't have made it. Perhaps it cared. So we're beginning to see that maybe the prototype isn't so bad after all. He genuinely cared for Theodore, and to a wider extent, he genuinely cares about the children in Playtime. But progressing more into the story, after you set up the generators, you exit out of the building and are tackled by Kissy Missy.
No! Let go! They didn't do anything wrong. We're actually here to help.
So here we learn more about the prototype, at least through Poppy's perspective. She reveals he's the reason why she was locked in the case and wants you to destroy him, with Catnap being the final obstacle in the way. And the way that I see it is that the prototype locked Poppy up to protect her. Not because he wanted her gone for good, but to protect her. Think about it, she's made of porcelain, and with all these killer toys running around, she's too fragile to be out. After the train crash, she now has a visible crack under her eye. I believe the prototype was trying to protect her, just like he was trying to protect Theodore from turning into Catnap, but Poppy has yet to see that. And so you continue on your journey, where you enter the schoolhouse. Now this is probably the most nightmarish part of the game, and just as Ollie is about to explain the horrors in here, Ollie is shortly cut off as we're introduced to the toys that lurk here.
Someone else in there too. They're not yours.
This is Miss Delight speaking. Please excuse the interruption. Students, remain in your seat until the bell has rung. And no going in the halls without a hall pass.
And throughout the school area, you can find notes detailing more information of Miss Delight and what happened in this school. In the first note, it states that after the hour of joy, it was just silence, and that someone had locked them in the school, not allowing any of the teachers to go out. The second note states how Miss Delight heard someone outside the lock, and that she also made a weapon of sorts. Pencils and rulers and tape and twine. I've taken to calling it Barb. It's crude, but if that door opens, I need to be ready. Another note states, I'm so sorry, I had to eat. I had to eat to survive. I ate them. I had to. And then upon finding the final note, it actually states who locked her in here. It reads, Barb and I found Catnap waiting all this time. All this agony. It was he who locked the door. I know it. I want to kill him, but knew better than to believe I could. He seemed oddly glad to see I was all that remained. We made a deal. We take care of each other now. Report what we see to the other and to him. So why did Catnap lock her and the other teachers in the school? Well, one of the tapes suggests that he did this to keep the teachers away from the children in order to protect them. In locking the teachers away, they're forced to starve and eat each other. Because if Catnap did not separate the children from the teachers, well, just have a listen.
Where are the children? Are they in the same place as the employees?
No.
Can I see them?
No.
That's all he'd tell me. Probably because he knew I'd kill them all.
So here Catnap and the prototype are really starting to show their actual love and care for the children. Anyways, after attempting to charge up the place, Miss Delight confronts you and you're forced to escape, having to stare at her so that she doesn't move. In the end, she meets a similar demise as Mommy Longlegs. And with that, the player enters the next destination, a cave-like area if you will. And in the distance, you can actually see Catnap standing over a shrine he made of the prototype. There's a lot of the remains of previous toys as well as a human skeleton, which I have a theory as to who they may be, but that'll be for another time. Anyways, throughout the game, you hear of Catnap worshipping the prototype like a god. Catnap even refers to him as the Angel of Salvation. And in the ARG, scientist Leith Pierre states that 1188, aka Catnap, follows around 1006, the prototype, like a lost puppy. Catnap is described as highly impressionable, but this could also be Catnap showing his loyalty to prototype when he was still a human. There's even this tape where Catnap talks to the scientist.
Hey, Theo. How you doing, bud? Normally I'd have Dr. Sawyer do this, but he's, out, let's say. So you got me until they find his replacement.
It's important to point out that Dr. Sawyer is mentioned as being needed to be replaced. Remember this name because I believe that Dr. Sawyer is the true main villain in Poppy Playtime, but more on that later. So as you progress through the game, you enter the playhouse where you meet the mini smiling critters. Here, you utilize your new hand to shoot flares at them to shoo them away. You've probably ran into some of the cardboard cutouts of the smiling critters, which have some pretty interesting lines.
Want to know what I remember about you?
Wanna go outside and hang out? I've never been outside before. I'll step out first.
Out of all of these, Kickin' Chicken is the most interesting one of the bunch because he mentions stepping outside and yelling in horror. This is interesting because this is the first time we hear of the toys trying to leave the building since the Hour of Joy. This has me theorizing that something or someone stopped him from leaving, and it's not the prototype. Again, more on this later. Progressing further in the playhouse, you encounter the last of the bigger smiling critters, Dog Day.
You're Pappy's angel. Come to save us.
It's a sad sight and honestly kind of shows the more cruel parts of both Catnap and the prototype. The mini smiling critters would then enter his body and possess him, chasing the player out of the area.
Please, just go! Run!
Ollie then sends you over to the last destination, the counselor's office. Here you find the emergency alert tape, which broadcasts a message across the company stating, "Open the doors now. The hour of joy has arrived." Throughout this area, you also encounter the many offices of the higher-ups, one of which being Stella Graber's office. And despite her being a higher-up, she was unaware of the true horrors of Playtime Co. Her job was to assist the children in finding a home, and in one of the tapes labeled the Hartman incident, when a couple wanted to adopt one of the children, this happened.
I understand you want to give Jeremy that home? Yes, and we would like to adopt. Ah, amazing! You'll be perfect for... Oh. What? It appears there's been some complications. The form says... testing. What does that mean? Tell us, what does that mean?
Miss Graber, we deserve a better explanation than that. Don't you think?
You're in charge of all this! How could you not know?
And why are we only finding out about this now?
I don't. I'm sorry.
So this is Stella Graber, confused on why this child's document says testing. The couple is also disgusted as to what this could mean. Anyways, progressing through this area, you're attacked by Catnap, who removes the gas mask that you had found earlier, exposing you to his nightmarish gas, forcing you to, well, have a nightmare. Here we have Poppy talking to the player while showing you the orphans who have all had a terrible fate.
Do you know who we once were? Do you see why we have to end this?
You wake up from this nightmare and hear Catnap talk to the player for the first time. Now here he pretty much reveals he doesn't really want to kill you, more so just wants you to leave. Even in the beginning of the game, he just tried to dispose of you instead of outright killing you. Regardless though, you choose to ignore him, and once you're about to reroute the power, Catnap stops you. He fills the room with his nightmarish gas, and you begin to hallucinate, seeing him no longer as this purple fluffy cat, but this more monstrous figure that looks similar to Gorefield, honestly. You attempt to run away from him, and along the way, you find another interesting tape where a scientist is talking to the prototype.
Go ahead.
Do you feel anything? You stick us.
Beat us.
Tear at flesh.
Do you feel it?
Here it's revealed that the prototype has dealt with a ton of pain, and we hear his voice change multiple times, possibly a collection of voices of the different toys he's obtained over time. The prototype also states that he's learning a lot from the scientist, foreshadowing what's to come in the future. And I believe the scientist that's speaking to the prototype is Dr. Sawyer. Again, remember that name because I believe he's the main villain of Playtime Co. And I'll explain that more later, but progressing further in the game, you do have your final showdown against Catnap where you charge up this machine while fighting off Catnap with steam and your arsenal of hands until you finally generate enough power in this machine, and using your grab pack, you power up your hand and electrocute Catnap. The prototype extends his hand, and Catnap, afraid at first, happily accepts he can finally be one with his god. And again, the prototype must know you're there, right? Like, why doesn't he kill you? Well, that's because he wants you to further progress. He needs your help. And as we proceed onward, finally reversing the gas, we meet with Poppy, who shows you what really went down in the Hour of Joy. Here, all the toys fought back, killing those that were guilty and also killing those that were innocent, and didn't even know what was actually going on. This is why Poppy wants to kill the prototype. After watching the tapes, you enter a nearby elevator, finally about to enter the prototype's lair, when suddenly you hear Kissy Missy cry in horror.
There's something. No! We're coming! Just hold on! Come on, go faster!
In a panic, Poppy and the player attempt to go back to save Kissy, but that's where the chapter ends and the theories begin. So many people believe the prototype is the main villain of Playtime Co., but I think there's something far more sinister than him. Because think about it, in the Hour of Joy, the toys got rid of majority of the staff, finally thinking they were able to escape, but they didn't, because they couldn't. A lot of these toys are starving down here, many resulting in cannibalism. They don't want to stay in Playtime Co. anymore, but they also can't leave because something or someone is preventing them from leaving. Remember Kickin' Chicken? The second he goes outside, he's yelling out in pain. Something is keeping him in there, and we can assume it's the prototype, but remember, he wanted to free the toys and the children, and that's why I believe the true identity of the prototype is Elliot Ludwig, the original founder and creator of Playtime Co. He has stated in the past, "There's nothing more gratifying to my soul than being the reason for a child's smile." We know that Elliot Ludwig got divorced in the year 1930, as well as having a family death, and although it doesn't specify who exactly died, I believe it was his daughter who unfortunately grew sick and one day passed. This tore Elliot Ludwig apart, and if you go to his desk in chapter 2, there's a note for experiment 814, where it states he would experiment on a live rat using a poppy flower and different mixtures to create a poppy gel. The note also says, "I still believe in the potential of the poppy flower. Its unusual properties lead me to believe that the proper mixture and procedure could have life-altering properties. The poppy flower has for a long time carried heavy symbolism, and I don't believe that's for no reason. Perhaps something larger than a rat would yield different results." See, after the death of his daughter, Elliot was so distraught he made it his mission to bring her back to life, and he eventually did by creating Poppy, the first live human to become a toy. So with the prototype being Elliot Ludwig and Poppy being his actual daughter, it would explain why the prototype locked her up during the Hour of Joy. He wanted to protect her from all the destruction and chaos he and the other toys were doing. And remember, Elliot Ludwig was divorced in 1930, and the Hour of Joy occurred in 1995. This would make him extremely old, so at this point he would have either died or became the prototype. But locking Poppy in the case made her resent the prototype, not knowing what his true intentions were, and the only way to get Poppy to trust them is by creating a fake persona, Ollie. We never actually see Ollie, and judging by the voice, it sounds like a kid, but also it's been 10 years since the Hour of Joy, so any kid would have grown up by now, don't you think? And many people believe that Ollie is either Baby Longlegs or literally the telephone, but I don't think so. Also, this is a bit of a stretch, but Ollie is almost an anagram to the name Elliot. But what does the prototype want with the player? Why did he open the door for the player after Mommy Longlegs' death? It's because he needs you to help him and the other toys, because someone else is lingering around this place, and I believe that someone to be Dr. Sawyer. For those of you who don't know Dr. Sawyer, his lore is scattered around the tapes and notes found in Playtime Co. He is responsible for creating the Bigger Bodies Initiative, the program that finally granted permission to allow the orphans to be experimented on and create the likes of Huggy Wuggy, Boxy Boo, and the rest of the human toys. This is revealed in VHS tape number 1 that can be unlocked in Project Playtime. Now, Elliot Ludwig loved children and didn't want this experimentation to ever occur. He would never approve of this, so Dr. Sawyer had to get rid of him, and thus he planted a body in a duffel bag which would later be found in Elliot Ludwig's home.
Local authorities report that the body of a young boy has been found on the estate of the late Elliot Ludwig, an esteemed toy maker and originator of the Playtime Company, found in an upstairs bedroom in a large...
This would ruin Elliot Ludwig's reputation, and so he disappeared. Now, no longer being the head of Playtime Co., with Elliot Ludwig out of the way, Dr. Sawyer would contact the head of production who would approve of his horrible experiments. His explanation is it's an effort to save Playtime Co. from going under.
How is that anything less than complete failure on our part?
And who was in charge of head of production? Well, that's you, the player. This is hinted in VHS number 2 found in Project Playtime, where Dr. Sawyer is excited to see his first experiment.
I wish to see him. The first of many, naturally. You have proven my Bigger Bodies Initiative a success. We need to start taming that appetite of yours to flesh.
Later in the tape, some text appears saying, "Your gift has finally arrived. You may have noticed it. It is the phone. You will be called when the time arrives." The phone is referring to Ollie calling you, and the tape further plays out stating, "You wonder who we are, but why? You should know. It was your doing that made us." So you, the player, the person in charge of production, approved of the Bigger Bodies Initiative, allowing Dr. Sawyer to do horrifying experiments on the orphans. Dr. Sawyer turned Elliot Ludwig into the prototype and continued to use the orphans for more experiments, up until at one point he disappeared. As stated in the tape where Leith Pierre is talking to Catnap, he states,
"Normally I'd have Dr. Sawyer do this, but he's, out, let's say. So you got me until they find his replacement.
So my theory is that Dr. Sawyer turned himself into something much more terrifying than the prototype and is trapping all the toys in Playtime Co. I think in chapter 4 we're finally going to meet the prototype, but he'll reveal to actually be good. Poppy and the player will then learn the true horrors of the Doctor, who we will finally meet in chapter 5. But again, all of this is just a theory. If you guys like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.